So welcome to this short series of videos on Horary Astrology. In these videos, I'm going to be taking a look at what Horary Astrology is, how we can use it in our daily life, a brief look at the technical aspects of interpreting a Horary chart, and then take a look at some examples to see how it works in the real world. So if that sounds of interest to you, keep watching. So what is Horary Astrology? Well, it is a branch of astrology that is quite unique and quite different to any other form, very different to birth chart natal astrology. It is a method of interpreting a horoscope for the moment a question is asked. So somebody may ask, should I move to Hawaii? Should I accept this job offer? Very practical, real world questions. And we can take the chart for that moment of the question, and actually the moment that the astrologer hears the question and the place that the astrologer is in, that forms the astrology chart. And then we can interpret that based on the symbolism of the configuration of that chart. So we're not using a person's birth chart at all. It is literally this moment in time. And that makes it very interesting. There's a quite prevalent view of seeing astrology as a science in within the confines of our current intellectual understanding of science. And so what I mean by that is trying to fit astrology into that paradigm. So it's almost seeing it as like this cosmic clock ticking in the background, and having this quite objective scientific interpretation of astrology. Whereas in my mind, it's not as simple as that. It's not as clear as that. It's a mystical art rather than a science, and it's much more alive and dynamic. And effectively, horary astrology is a form of divination, meaning the communion with spirit or the communion with the divine. It is asking a question of the great mystery and receiving a response. And it it doesn't fit into this kind of almost cold cosmic clock way of viewing things. It's much more participatory. It's much more alive in the moment, and the energy we bring to a question is shown within the question itself. As hopefully maybe I'll highlight what I mean by that as I go along. So in my mind, casting a horary chart is a ritual. And yeah, for me, it is a communion with spirit. Now, you don't need to believe in spirits to be able to practice horary, but it is important to understand that horary isn't like this kind of mechanical device: input question, data, output answer. It's There's very specific times when you can ask a question and get a useful answer. It's not like, as I have to say, I first thought when I discovered it, I was like, wow, I can now find out the answer to every question in the universe ever. And that was a very naive way of looking at astrology. It just doesn't work, specifically of horary. It doesn't work like that. There's very specific questions that you can ask, and yeah, there's things that you can ask. It's not just a direct telephone line to the universe, to the divine, to God, to like tell me all the answers. So I get into more about that, and the kind of questions that can be asked. And it's important to recognize not all questions will give an answer. And that's part of the practice. And accepting that is also part of using horary in a respectful and healthy and ultimately helpful manner. So to answer the question of how we can use horary in our lives, we need to discuss what kind of questions can be asked. And the first thing is it has to be an important question in your life. You can't use horary for trifling matters. It's like, should I go to this restaurant for dinner tonight? It doesn't really matter, does it? There has to be a charge to it. There has to be a certain energy that you bring to it, that you put into the question. And in my experience, the more important a question, the more likely there is to be given an answer, and the clearer that answer is. So yeah, that's the first thing. It has to be a weighty matter. It has to be of some consequence. And the best questions are always something that you can do something about. So if you can't take action in a matter, you might get an answer, but it's not the best use of Horary astrology. Ideally, it's a tool for helping you to take right action in a situation. And my teacher, the incredible Jeffrey Cornelius, he he told me how he told me about the root of the word desire etymologically. So horary, he says, is a test of one's true desire. And the word desire comes from the Latin de sidere, which means from the stars, which is astrology, but you can also interpret as a metaphor for um, divine will, for this higher higher aspect of life, not in this physical realm. And so, from this perspective, one's deepest true desire and divine will are actually one and the same. But as humans, it's not always easy for us or clear for us what our true desire is. We might think we know what we want, but it might be coming from the mind, the ego's, grasping at something really nice that it wants, and nice shiny object. But our deeper soul's longing or desire may be something different. And so for me, that's the core of what we're doing with Horary, is using it as a tool to test and access our soul's deepest desire in any one matter. And it should also be really relevant to our own personal lives. And we should have a mandate to ask the question, which essentially means it is relevant, directly relevant to our lives. So that means it's not something to be used to try and gain some information you're not supposed to know, or to be nosy. You know, is my brother's wife cheating on him? It's not really a question to ask Horary. It's not really your business. Unless if your brother comes to you and he's like, I think my wife might be cheating on me, then you can draw up a Horary then. Then it's relevant. Then there may well be answers for him. But we must have a personal mandate. There must be we must have skin in the game. There must be a reason to ask the question. Likewise, questions on the world stage. You see this quite a lot. I see this quite a lot with people asking big worldly questions. For example, leading up to an election, will Joe Biden win the next election? Will Donald Trump win the next election? It's you're not going to get an answer. Quite simply, it's not directly relevant to your life. Unless Joe Biden comes to you and asks, am I going to win the next election? Then it might be relevant. Then there might be a mandate to ask that question. He's probably not going to do that. He's probably not going to come and ask you that. But if he does, let's go for it. So yeah, these big worldly questions are not I just got distracted. I don't know if you can hear in the background, but my dog is woofing in her sleep. It just distracted me. Um, so yes, we should have a mandate to ask a question. We should have skin in the game. All right. And the other thing is the question should be one that is possible to answer with astrology. So either or questions are difficult to answer. They're best avoided. Should I move to Hawaii or should I move to Australia? Well, it's hard to see that from a chart. And it's also the case that we should not abdicate our responsibility. So even if we just have a 51% inkling towards Hawaii, then you could say, should I move to Hawaii? And there's a slight favoring of that, but we're really not sure. But we're asking a specific question, not an either or. And because of that, we're taking an active role in the situation rather than passively saying, astrology, tell me what to do. That can make a big difference to the energy that we bring to it. Yeah, and this sense of the active or participatory component of it. You know, one of my teachers used the word kataki as a synonym sometimes for horary. And kataki is a Greek word. It could be translated as initiative. So, you know, it's guiding us on what initiative to take. It's not just a dead, this is what's going to happen. And the other thing of importance here is being willing to act on the question. So, yeah, asking a question requires our willingness. We are conscious beings, and the universe is also conscious. And you could say astrology is conscious. And so we shouldn't come to horary with a kind of like, oh, I'm just curious. What's it going to say? And but we're not really invested in it. We haven't put our heart into it because we're like, oh, I just see what it says. I don't know whether or not I'll actually follow that. Weirdly, or not weirdly, depending on your understanding and view of life, the astrology, the chart seems to know how much we're invested in the question we've asked. And so it can literally show, for example, it can show me as the astrologer, the person's already made their mind up about this matter. And even though they've asked this question, they're not going to listen to what you say. And so it can warn the astrologer, you know, you can't help in this situation. They are not going to listen. And so the chart can literally say to you, don't give them an answer. You can't give them an answer. Because the point of horary, you could argue the point of all astrology is not to give some kind of objective factual information, but to move a person's soul. So it's this mystical act and interaction between the chart, the astrologer, and the person that is designed to move their soul forwards in life through the question, through the matter at hand. And so, yes, being willing to act on it. And we have free will. So you could come to a question, be willing to act on it, see the answer and say, I'm not going to do that. That's your free will. But the chart will show divine will. It will show what's in your deepest, best interests. which isn't always the easy path. My experience, it's usually not the easy path, what's in your deepest interest. But that's what the horary will show. And so, yeah, coming to this whole process as a ritual act of communing with something greater than oneself and being willing to act on it is the ideal way to ask a question and to engage in this process.